Before we got started, our main audience is going to be audio only anyway, probably, but had a little eye candy today. Right before we got started, I opened up Google Data Studio. I wanted to see how easy it was to create a 50-state survey visualization on Google. It used to be called Data Studio, but it's called Looker now.
Yeah.
And, because I think they purchased a company called Looker, which had those kinds of data visualizations. So I put together a quick map I just downloaded a survey from Westlaw.
Oh, yeah.
Did a quick search, geocoded the cells, and then created a data visualization, which I don't know. I think it's a fun way to share that information with clients.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, with clients, I feel like that would be really helpful. But we won't be able to see it, huh?
Yeah, you know.
Oh, there's a little bait and switch there.
I actually forgot about that. Yeah, I don't know if, yeah. So I thought we're just a couple minutes away. I thought we'd cover. Well, you got the notes. I thought those were kind of big deals that we should address today. Yale pulling out of Harvard, and now UC Berkeley, I guess, is also pulled out of the U.S. News and World Reports.
Boy, I think it's that's maybe will be what it takes to put some sort of rational thought into how these things are done, is to have some of the big dogs pull out of that fight.
Yeah. I mean, without them, it's meaningless, really, right? I mean, there's.
And one could argue it's relatively meaningless anyhow, but without them, you do wonder what's the point at all. Yeah.
If Mitchell Hamlin decides, we're not
gonna play that game anymore. You know, my time working at William Mitchell, I don't think it divulges any secrets. Of course, everyone looks to see where they fall in the rankings, and I'm pretty sure the dean had two versions. If Mitchell had gone down in the rankings, then there'd be a great statement about how rankings really don't mean anything and blah, blah, blah. And then if Mitchell went up in the rankings, we're so pleased to see that Mitchell is now on the top, whatever, regional law schools, So it's okay if you're moving up, but if not, it doesn't mean anything.
The University of St. Thomas went up like 20 points. And it's funny because it's I mean, I heard students talking about it and how proud they were of their institution.
Oh, yeah.
I just, it sort of feels like the wrong thing to focus on to me, but.
Well, have you ever, do they publish all the metrics that they use to make those rankings?
That's a good question. I'm not sure that
they use all these metrics. Like, they used to use number of volumes in the library, and then there's a question of when you have things online. I'm sorry, I have to take this call quick.
I have to get the correct, is it Brian Tamanaha? There's a book.
I'm sorry, Mike. I have a family member in the hospital. I wanted to make sure it was.
Oh, yeah, I understand. Not a problem.
No, so they would they'd count volumes, but they'd count I think other things I think Hamlin Law School would get dinged because their student bar association ran their bookstore, and you got a little bump based on how much money the college was putting in the bookstore or something. There were all these strange little variables that just made things difficult.
There's a book I read quite some time ago. I'm not sure when it was published. The author's, and I'll fumble the last name, Brian Tamanaha.
Okay. I remember that name. Yeah.
Failing Law Schools. I don't know how old it was. Let's see. But he did outline in that book among other things. the criteria for the U.S. News and World Reports.
Oh, yeah. Well, Malcolm Gladwell had a little thing about not law school reports, but I think something about U.S. News and World Report rankings generally, about how they rank on things that may or may not actually lend to the value of whatever the proposition is. And he compared it to Consumer Reports, rating race cars, how quick you go from 0 to 60 miles per hour. It doesn't matter to most people looking for a commuting car. And so you're ranking the wrong things.
Trying to figure out when this was published. We should get started. We're at the top of the hour.
Yeah.
We'll cover these topics in brief. It's Gray Matters. I'm Mike Carlson, researcher at Gray Paper Legal.
I'm Karen Westwood, director of the Hennepin County Law Library.
Hey, Karen.
Hey.
Welcome back. How was your week?
It was good. How about
Good.
yours?
I had a very, very, very busy week. Happy to be busy. Had a couple of interesting questions this week, but what about you? What was your most interesting legal research question of the week?
Well, I always feel, Mike, like my interesting questions are somewhat pedestrian, but I was reminded this week of the value of the, it is called Almanac of the Federal Judiciary.
Yeah.
And it's one of these directories. Law libraries used to spend some effort in collecting a variety of directories. Now people can look up a lot of information online. But I think what people want is not necessarily what's easily found online. Like a law firm advertising itself, there's valuable information there, but you want someone else's opinion about them. And kind of the same with judges, right? Information you find about judges is very factual. Where did they go to law school? When were they appointed to the bench? But the Almanac of the Federal Judiciary is a somewhat expensive title because they survey attorneys who have appeared before judges. And you'll find information about your federal judge, but then a bunch of comments, don't expect this judge to ask many questions. I thought this judge was super fair. I disagreed with the result, but the reasoning was clear. And it's a great source that I think people forget about.
Yeah, you said it's an outrageously expensive product. I mean, libraries are already dinged for being a library. You pay a premium already, so I don't know if you can talk price or if that's confidential. But man, I'd love to know.
I don't think it's confidential. I can't remember anymore. But the thing with the directory is it's updated multiple times in a year.
Oh, really?
It looks like, I bet this was updated 4 times a year. And I'm sure
That's
it was
incredible.
I bet it was $1,000 each update.
Yeah, wow.
I'm not sure exactly. I guess between 900 and 1,200. And it just, it was kind of staggering. So we dropped it. But, if we got a bunch of interest in it, I would consider re-upping it because it really fills kind of a niche that it's hard to fill otherwise. Many practitioners don't get to federal court that often, so they don't have a lot of knowledge. We have a similar product. It's now on the Bar Association website, I think, for Minnesota judges, right?
I'm not sure. The civil litigation section has
That's what I'm
a
thinking
survey
of.
that they send out to Minnesota judges. The survey asks things like,
that's right.
Yeah, it was always a popular resource. We wrapped it into a couple of different applications when I was at the Bar Association as well. But it asks things like how long do you typically allow for a non-dispositive motion? Who do you call if you've got a question about a procedural matter? Right. I don't remember all the questions, but rather than just having the bio, which is available, as you say, with the factual information on the court's website, you get some real information.
Right.
The challenge there is, they send out the survey once a year. this is sort of the way that, organizations, nonprofits, particularly my work, where they have a committee that does a thing, it gets done, it's done. And, and the rigor that's required to say, hey, just another reminder, this is a super valuable, you add a lot of value to the profession by completing the survey. That kind of work I don't think is necessarily done. And it makes sense to me that the product is $1,000.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a ton of work. It's a ton of work. But a nonprofit, like the Bar Association, that's huge value. If they, if that's a rolling effort by the civil litigation section in particular, or the appellate,
right.
A lot
is good. There used to be, though, a Minnesota product. I think that's fallen by the wayside, where they would survey Minnesota attorneys and say, give us your impressions of this judge, if you've appeared in front of them. And then they would kind of consolidate and anonymize that information. I think now, Mike, when you work primarily in a certain jurisdiction, you just send out a note to your friends, or like the State Bar Association has a listserv. You might say, anyone appeared before magistrate so-and-so, contact me off the list. And so you have an avenue to get that information. But if you're sitting here in Minnesota, you have a chance to be in federal court, it's hard to know who you're going to ask to get a frank opinion. So it's nice to have a source like this.
Yeah, there are other listservs. There are other community forums as well. But for those oddball one-offs, as you say, if you're not always having a resource is awesome.
Yeah,
there is a digital version. I thought as I Googling around, because I've never actually been in that resource. That was a new one to me. But the courtroom insights, I think, is it looks like there might be a digital interface with the.
Maybe this is now our volumes are so old. They say Aspen Law and Business on them, a publisher that no longer exists. But Wolters Kluwer publishes this one now. We do have some books on a Wolters Kluwer platform that are accessible to our law library members. This one is not on that platform because I actually canceled it a couple of years ago during the pandemic when no one could come in and use it anyhow. But if I re-upped it, then it would be available online. And maybe it's also on this Courtroom Insights as well. I'm not sure. All these directories tend to have very similar names.
I know. It is Courtroom Insights. I think I got the name correct there. But oftentimes our client will drop in the judicial analytics just as a side. People seem to really appreciate that. Just a little extra. How long does it take for that judge to rule on this kind of motion, or things like that? So they're super popular resources.
What do you use for your judicial analytics?
Westlaw. Westlaw's got a judicial analytics product. What's great about the MSBA resource, their survey is state data, right? Well, it's not data, it's a survey, but and that stuff is super hard to find at the on a research platform. Just the docket information is just not readily available for analysis for these publishers. So it's very nice, some kind of something from the bar associations. But if I do manage to, especially at the federal level, very, very popular resource, those judicial analytics.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yep. Everybody wants to know.
I know. It's illegal. Did you know it's illegal in France to? I think there's it's a criminal violation to collect data on a judge.
Really?
France, yeah. Judicial analytics are prohibited in France.
Wow, the things people want to control.
I
know. Crazy. So what was your interesting question of the week?
I got into some 50 state surveys this week. Not a full-on project, but I did cross-jurisdictional surveys. So I had a number of states to look at. Always a fun project. Those can be a little nerve-wracking because I think we've discussed this before, where this is often a summer associate issue.
Right.
Where they'll give it to the associate 3 days before they're supposed to go back to school and say, get this 50-state survey done.
Yeah.
And it's just not possible.
Right.
It's a big project. They're often very big projects.
Yeah.
And I always feel sorry for that associate, that
Yeah.
temporary employee. But there are good resources for that. Westlaw, again, has got a ton of tools built in. They've got existing surveys. For this project, it was a popular topic. I just used the index term. Westlaw's got a jurisdictional survey tool where you just do a keyword search and it delivers all of the results, a nice visualization, so you can see the big states. It's not a perfect solution. It's as automated as it can be, and it's not typically the way I do a very thorough 50-state survey project. I like to begin those kinds of. We could talk all day about these projects because they vary quite a bit.
Right.
Is it case law? Is it statutory? Is it regulatory?
Yeah.
Often it's regulatory, which it can be challenging because you're really in the weeds with that kind of stuff.
Well, and I think, I mean, just let me once again state the obvious, my role here. And that is the vocabulary varies so much. I remember years ago trying to do a survey on 3 strikes laws. Remember 3 strikes and you're out?
Yeah.
Well, they were rarely called 3 strikes laws. So you could search 3 strikes, but you weren't going to get much. Often they were called repeat offenders or multiple felony, or it just went on and on. It was really, it's tricky to figure out what these different states are calling their legislation.
Yeah, and and if you're not finding anything in a particular jurisdiction, does that mean you missed it? There's always the challenge of trying to prove a negative.
Exactly.
Or is it like medical marijuana? Marijuana can be spelled 5 different ways.
Yeah, exactly.
And it can be a challenge. If I'm trying to do something that is more bespoke, quite a bit more customized, and I don't, maybe you've got strategies for this as well, but I usually just begin with a spreadsheet and do my jurisdictions down the left-hand side, and then I open up a number of columns for usually several columns for citations, because often it's not one citation. Unfortunately, often it's a set of citations.
Right.
I'll do that, and then you'll find common themes usually as you're going through those.
Right. Then you hone in on the legal terms of art. Yeah.
I'll add in columns for specific topics that are common among several jurisdictions, or and then finally a notes section to say, hey, this is pretty weird. Look what they did in Nevada, or whatever. Just so that the outlier weird additional language, and I'll sort of work that list as I go along. I'll set up that initial spreadsheet, and then I'll usually begin with something like a 3 strikes law type of question. If I'm doing this in Westlaw, I'll do a plain language search even just to get
because that will populate all those synonyms for you.
Yeah. And the natural language processing works really well, so you'll get a pretty good look at what the results are supposed to look like. So you get a feeling pretty quickly for what you're looking for in those statutes, the terminology and the variations of the terminology and things like that. So even if you can begin by knocking off some of the obvious ones right away, and then you can tailor your search with Boolean and work your way down the list. And I don't know. I mean, what if you were doing a 50-state regulatory survey? We charge what I think is a significant amount of money for that, because it's a lot of work.
It's a ton of work. So does the name Cheryl Nyberg mean anything to you?
Yeah.
So
Why do I know that name?
this is more about laws than regulations, though. For many years, she published something called Subject Compilations of State Laws. Now it exists on Hein Online.
I don't know that. I don't know
I
that
think
one.
it's still being done, although it may have fallen by the wayside because it was truly a librarian kind of geeky labor of love.
Yeah.
This woman, I think, originally did it on her own. Cheryl Nyberg, I think, was a law librarian in Washington State. She would skim through all the law review articles that came out and look for any articles that did some kind of survey of a statute. And then she would give it a subject classification and indicate in the subject compilation what nature the review was. So I grabbed an old volume off the shelf. So let's see if
This is our colleague from the University of Washington.
I think that's where she was from. So here's something on traffic laws, right? Liability for red light, toll booth infractions. Oh, wait, this was a Westlaw survey. So once Westlaw started doing 50 state surveys, she started including them. But here's, now these are all websites. Okay, so here's something on transgender laws. An article called Being Transgender in the Era of Trump. It's an article published in UC Irvine Law Review. And then it tells you on page 589, footnote 35, are citations. Cites to bills, session laws, and codes, covers the 24 states that prohibit public accommodations discrimination against transgender persons, and the 20 states that prohibit housing discrimination against transgender persons. So this is how we used to always start a 50-state survey, was to try to find an article that had already done some kind of review, and often it was just a footnote. It would tell you footnote 35 lists them all, and then you would start probably a spreadsheet or some kind of document where you populate the ones that you know, and then you go and double check to make sure that that information was still current. But that would always give you a leg up if you could find some poor law student who at some point has
that's a great
your own 50-state survey.
That is a great point. It is likely someone's done the work before. I found them on the, and you're right, before you do draft that spreadsheet. Oftentimes you can get what you need just from that footnote because somebody's done the work before. I found them on websites. Just somebody who not so long ago there was a right of publicity statutes. I found that was somebody's practice area. And they had it on their website.
Once in a while you find that with a nonprofit as well who's interested in an issue, like especially if it's something pretty in the public space, like gun laws or something. Or I think, I mean, just an organization that's interested in that area will sometimes on their website have a listing of various states and what the laws are in those states around that issue. And that's a great launch pad too.
Yeah, and I think they are typically launch pads. It's challenge with the 50-day survey is maintenance of that document. Typically.
But to your point about regulatory, man, I don't know. I don't know who does 50-state regulatory surveys. Do Westlaw and Lexis have a few, right?
Yep. They have quite a few. I don't believe
so many regulations.
I know. Yeah. Well, and the maintenance piece is, with a key site alert or on Lexis, you can do similar kinds of alerting. Those are super valuable. I think, if you could just get an email saying, hey, there's been a proposed bill. There are other services for that kind of thing as well. I think we've talked about the tool Fiscal Note on here before. That's a government relations management tool. There are other great resources for alerting for changes, but you also have to, if it's a subject matter related issue, you're also doing separate alerts, not just on the currentness of
right.
this current citation, but for proposed new bills, proposed new regulations, and
That's right. Yeah, because they might be adding to that chapter. And so an alert about an existing statute or reg isn't going to pull up something like that.
yeah,
So if it's something completely new or something that gets codified somewhere else, yeah, I don't know.
yeah, it can be. Oh, and that's why we have compliance teams and compliance officers.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's somebody's full-time job
Yeah.
to get the training materials up to date, and
Yeah.
lobbyist, and it's a whole nother world.
Yeah, it is for sure.
Those are fun projects. I do like to do those. There's right before we got started, we were talking about Google's new product, Looker.
Right.
It used to be called Fusion Tables back in the day, and I know we've chatted about these before, but it's data visualization tools. I think a lot of folks, I think Google put it together so you could do Google Analytics, but but you can do a lot of things with it. It's a sort of a nice free substitute for Tableau, which is a costly product, though they do have a free public version as well. But yeah, Google Data Studio, I 5 minutes before we got started today, before we connected online, I downloaded a 50-state survey from a query that I did on Westlaw. I didn't even use an existing one. I downloaded it to a CSV file. I imported it into a Google Sheet. I built a map. It only took me 5 minutes to do this.
Remarkable. Yeah.
Yeah. The value of that is limited for all the reasons we just been talking about, because you got to do the work. But I think it's a good demonstration of how quickly you can get a valuable data visualization that you can share with your colleagues or a client. And
sometimes that's for the point of view of a client, that's great to be able to look at a map and really get the lay of the land in a way that reading through a list of states and trying to figure it out just it won't resonate as well.
Yeah, a lot of folks will say, it's just eye candy, and I think, but I don't know. For me, if it's more comforting, I don't know.
There's nothing wrong with eye candy.
There's nothing wrong with that. If this is what you do all day long, what's the matter with a little sweets in your?
That's right.
Some people like sugar in their coffee. It's
And it might just be, again, kind of, that's just the broad overview. I don't think any attorney is going to just look at a map and make a decision without looking at the underlying data, but it can give you like literally the lay of the land. What states have adopted these kinds of statutes that could just be a yes/no indicator on a map, could give you a really good sense of what's going on.
Yeah. Also, from my perspective, it's a fun project to work on as well. It just gives it a little bit more, flair, a little bit more fun to do a project like that. Before we drop today, I think we should at least mention what seems like seismic changes in the profession this week. To me, they seem like a big deal. I know that the state of Minnesota, along with other states, are looking at alternative pathways to the profession. And I don't know how this might be one of my LinkedIn contacts. I can't remember how I actually came across it, but the Minnesota Board of Law Examiners appears to be taking a serious look at alternative pathways to the profession. I'm never certain if this is just we've seen this before with like triple LTs and how seriously they're actually considering these measures. It's hard to tell from the public comment period, but the fact that they're bringing it up at all seems remarkable to me. Talking about a non-licensed option or a different bar exam. And did you get
Don't they have 3 committees?
What's that?
Don't they have 3 committees? I feel like they're looking at kind of 3 general approaches. One, like a different kind of bar exam. one just sort of an extended kind of internship or
Right.
apprenticeship or something that doesn't, and one about just sort of maybe similar to Wisconsin, if you attend an accredited law school, maybe in Minnesota, you're automatically granted admission to the bar. I don't know. I think those are the three general sort of approaches they're kicking around to see how viable they are. And yeah, I think it's significant that they're even talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I've talked to attorneys who have, read for the bar. Vermont is a program that permits that, and we're all familiar with what maybe all familiar with what Kim Kardashian is
Yes, California.
trying to do. Yeah, I mean, we sort of mock that, or but the students, the professionals, the attorneys who I talked to said, I talked to a Vermont attorney who said, I was accepted to all of the law schools in Vermont, but I have a colleague who could give me the practical guidance that I need.
Yeah.
There's also a reference, and I think it was to a New Hampshire program. Did I get that right in the notice? Well, I'll be sure to post this in the show notes. That's a very well-respected reading for the bar type of program, very rigorous program, hard to get into type of thing. It was referenced, and I hadn't heard of that before. There's also this next gen bar exam, just a new bar exam that's being looked at. So it's for me, I think that's pretty exciting stuff. I think it's past time to.
Don't you think it's a result of COVID and all the problems that the bar exams were having with administering them remotely, and how it just really it's shown a light on the downsides of having an exam like that as a means of trying to certify attorneys. So
yeah, I suspect you're right, even though to me that sounds nonsensical, because what I'm saying. I mean, the technical challenges of administering an exam don't necessarily speak to the substantive issues and the fact that the exam doesn't test competency. But I suspect you're right that that was the kind of same issue with court hearings and things like that, where can we do this, do we require our clients to wait for half an hour, take a half a day off for a 15-minute hearing?
Yeah, I think it was similar. It just begged the question of why are we doing this anyhow? So all the technology problems were like throwing up these challenges, and I think people started saying, wait, is it worth investing all of this energy and tech into making a perfect technical experience when we're not convinced it's really measuring what it's trying to measure anyhow? So yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'm excited for that. I don't know if that's I think a lot of the profession is tuning into that as well. It's not a specifically legal research issue, I suppose. Though I did see, I know I shared with you the what seemed to me a goofy introduction or piece of the next gen bar exam, but I think that's a working idea. There's a legal research portion. There's a legal research portion on the. I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it had to do with the identifying terms that may cause confusion or something like that. Or I think they were wanting to find statutes that might be ambiguous, trying to link it to the rule, rules of. But of construction and things like that. So we'll be interested to see. But it was fun to see that legal research was actually a part of the.
Yes, it made it, at least on the draft so far. Yeah.
But the other issue this week was the news that Yale, Harvard, and now I see this morning UC Berkeley not sharing the data with U.S. News and World Reports. That to me that's a big deal, isn't it? I mean,
I think so. It'll be very interesting to see then how many other schools sort of stand down from that. It's a lot of work to gather that data and submit it. Although I think a lot of it is submitted to the American Bar Association anyhow, as part of
Yeah.
law school reporting practices. But I think people did measure additional metrics and send those to US News. And yeah, I mean, if those big schools are not gonna play in that game anymore, it makes me wonder if other folks are gonna stand down too. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, we were saying, without Yale, Harvard, and any of the T14, unless they're pulling out, there's no credibility with the, this is part of the problem, the third tier trash, which is just a horrible thing for the profession, right? I mean, that's part of the framing. Unless you went to a T14 school, what good are you, right? And I've heard, my colleagues in legal services, doing legal aid, saying that their clients are wanting to know when they get to speak with a real lawyer and having to remind them. And it's the same thing with folks who didn't attend a T14 school, like myself.
And me.
And it's like, are you a real lawyer? Because and it's because of a marketing tool from the magazine. Now it's super interesting to read, the commentary on this from the folks from Yale. I don't know if anybody reads David Latt's letter or any of those materials, but it's interesting to see how that's being framed differently by the folks who attended T14 schools, still in favor of it, and the folks who are outside of that universe. There are different takes, even though they're both in support. In particular, I think it was interesting that I think David Latt's article that I read, said one of the reasons the rankings don't work is because schools are too diverse, and it's unfair to apply a singular. I had the same, but I think he's partially right. That the schools are too diverse, so it doesn't make sense to apply a single model for the entire profession.
Right.
From where we sit on the other end, we think, well, that the ranking, because of the rules of the ranking, really inhibit diversity of law schools, because there's only one path to getting to T14. And so we're in a situation now where there's no encouragement to diversify the law school experience, which is a problem. So that you have these weird uniform rules that you were mentioning, things like what were you telling me about earlier?
That they were measuring.
Like
the number of volumes in the law library.
Right.
When you start going online, that it loses meaning. How is anyone counting these things? I think they used to count linear feet of shelving in the library as one of the measures. I mean, it's kind of a goofy thing, and people are able to massage those numbers one way or the other. And I don't know. I know with undergrad rankings, they sometimes include the size of the endowment that schools have as kind of a proxy for how much aid they're able to give students. But that seems a little unfair too, to have schools competing with the size of their endowments. So,
Yale and Harvard were complaining of the fact that it really discouraged the participation of public service attorneys, and they would be dinged also for the number of post-employment opportunities that came through or post-law school employment opportunities that came through the law school. So if the law school was hiring you to do some public service work, that was additional, which kind of makes sense, because are you that's another way of padding the stats.
Artificially inflating your numbers. There was some scandal, not scandal, mild scandal a number of years ago about law schools checking in with their alums about their employment status, and they were being like, they're employed. I'm not mentioning that it was
that's right.
I think then they changed the criteria to employed in a law
profession,
related.
yeah. I think that it was a half-time, full-time.
Right.
And I think all of that information, there is a resource from the ABA.
Yeah.
The
Yeah, the
the
ABA
standards.
collects a lot of that. Yeah.
509 required disclosures, and that includes, and you can look this up for any of how many law schools are there now? 195 law schools?
Yeah, something like that.
But you can look up their required disclosures and employment outcomes and their passage rates, their bar passage rates at the
Is that on
ABA.
the ABA website?
It's on the ABA website. Yeah, it's the ABA required disclosures.org.
Oh, okay. Yep.
I'm sure to share that, and it's just a simple table you can download, and
that's what prospective law students should maybe be doing for research. Take a
yeah.
look at that.
And the law schools are required to post those on their website, right? So there is what the ABA believes is good information to review. We could debate those as well. I think those are definitely worth a critical look, but you can go to the school's website, look at the data that the ABA requires to be disclosed, free of charge. You don't have to purchase that.
And it's supposed to be the same from school to school and make it easier for students to compare the same criteria across schools, which is, always problematic when you're just relying on a school's own way of describing themselves. But if you have something required by the ABA like this, that you report it in this way, then you can make a better comparison.
Yeah, and what exactly is U.S. News World Reports adding to those required disclosures,
Right.
that are giving us additional valuable information about which school we should attend. Not sure. The Brian Tamahama's book we were talking about earlier, which was published a few years ago now, called Failing Law Schools. But the great discussion in that book about the U.S. News World Reports, the accreditation standards from the ABA, very, very critical of the whole institution. But an incendiary title, perhaps, but a good argument, I think, from Mr. Tamahana. Hard name to spit out at Friday morning, but
8:30,
not that early. It's not that early. All right. Karen, what do you have going on this week? Where should we be finding you?
It's a short week. We'll be here in the law library for Monday through Wednesday, but government offices are closed Thursday and Friday.
Great.
So we have to get all our research done early in the week.
Are you a turkey person? Do you do that as a?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
How about you? Do you have anything coming up this week?
We also have family, and I think we have a fancy new grill. I think that we're gonna put the meat on. Yeah. Should be fun, but might be a short week here as well. The building that I operate out of is open during the holidays, but probably
well, great. Well, send us your questions if you have a good one. Mike and I love to do some digging.
Absolutely. The email address you can send it to is just you can send it to me, mike@graypaperlegal.com. That's Gray with an A, graypaperlegal.com. And send us your questions. Be very happy to throw those into the mix on our next pod. Thanks, Karen.
Great, thanks. Have a good week.
You
Happy
too.
Thanksgiving. Bye.